Captain Marco, Chen's scout vessel, shudders violently as it pierces the atmosphere of the uncharted planet designated XR-27. A blinding flash from an unexpected magnetic storm has fried his navigation systems and damaged the quantum drive beyond his ability to repair. The ship careens toward a vast ocean of what appears to be liquid amber, the control panel flashing critical warnings as Marco desperately fights to level the descent. Come on, he mutters, his knuckles white against the manual override controls. The emergency thrusters sputter and whine, giving him just enough control to redirect toward a stretch of iridescent beach visible through the rapidly clearing cloud cover. The landing, if you could call it that, sends him slamming against his restraints as the ship skids across the strange metallic sand, throwing up plumes of material that sparkle like diamond dust in the alien sunlight. When the vessel finally grinds to a halt beside towering spires of crystalline formations, Marco runs a quick systems check, his heart sinking with each red indicator that flashes across the screen. Propulsion, offline. Communications, offline. Life support. He checks the readout and sighs, 12 hours remaining. He cycles through emergency protocols, broadcasting a distress signal on all frequencies, but the result is the same, static. Something in this planet's atmosphere or magnetic field is blocking transmission. According to his star charts, the nearest outpost is 4 days away at maximum speed, which is irrelevant given his ship's condition. Marco suits up in his exosuit, the material adjusting to his body temperature as the helmet seals with a soft hiss. The suit's sensors analyze the atmosphere outside, breathable, technically, but with trace elements his body couldn't process long-term. Better safe than sorry. As he steps onto the alien beach, the ground seems to respond to his weight, dimpling slightly before firming up again. The air shimmers with particles that dance like fireflies around him, some drawn to his suit's energy signature, creating a halo effect that distorts his vision. Marco adjusts his helmet's filter, bringing the landscape into sharp focus. The two suns overhead cast overlapping shadows that move in ways that defy Earth physics. In the distance, a forest of translucent vegetation sways despite the absence of wind, their movements almost deliberate, as if observing the strange visitor. His suit's audio sensors pick up something, a melodic sequence that repeats every 17 seconds. Not random noise, but a pattern, possibly artificial. Better than sitting here waiting for life support to fail, Marco says to himself, marking the direction of the signal on his heads-up display. The journey through the forest is disorienting. The plants react to his presence, some recoiling, others reaching out with tendrils that glow with bioluminescent pulses. Small creatures, if they can be called that, phase in and out of visibility as they scurry between the flora. Marco's scientific curiosity battles with his survival instinct as he collects readings on everything he passes. The signal grows stronger as he approaches a clearing where the forest gives way to a rock formation, unlike anything in his geological database. Massive stones float several meters above the ground, held in perfect formation by forces he can't identify. Between them, glowing veins of energy pulse in the same 17-second rhythm as the signal. And there, nestled within this impossible geological formation, stands a structure that defies classification, neither a building nor a natural formation, but something in between. Its surfaces expand and contract in gentle rhythm, like breathing lungs, the material shifting between opacity and transparency in waves. As Marco approaches, an opening forms in what he assumes is the front wall, the material parting like liquid mercury. Light spills out from inside, casting his shadow long behind him. "Hello," He calls out, weapon instinctively half-drawn. A figure moves within, tall and graceful with proportions almost, but not quite human. As it steps into the light, Marco finds himself face to face with a being whose skin shifts colours like an aurora, rippling with patterns that seem to reflect his own emotional state. Her eyes, if they are eyes, contain what look like miniature galaxies, star systems swirling in their depths. "I've been expecting someone," she says in perfect standard English, studying him with unnerving intensity. "I can fix your ship." A pause, her head tilting at an angle, just wrong enough to emphasize her alienness. "If you fulfill a single request for me." "What kind of request?" Marco asks, hands still resting on his weapon. Years of first contact protocols flash through his mind, but none quite cover this scenario. Nalavex moves with liquid grace across the living floor of her dwelling, each step causing ripples of bioluminescence to spread outward. "Please enter fully. The atmosphere here is calibrated to your physiology." Marco hesitates before removing his helmet, his suit sensors confirming the air is indeed safe. The interior of the structure is larger than it appeared from outside, a paradox of space that makes his eyes struggle to focus. "You have a name?" he asks, following her past walls lined with what appear to be technology and organic matter grown together in symbiotic harmony. "You may call me Nalavex," she responds, her voice melodic yet precise. "And you are Marco Chen of Earth, captain of the scout vessel Horizon Seeker." Marco freezes. "How do you?" "Your ship's registry is broadcast in its energy signature," she explains, gesturing toward a pulsing membrane on the wall that displays scrolling data. "I've been monitoring your descent since you entered this system." She leads him to a central chamber where a three-dimensional model of his damaged ship rotates above a platform of swirling mist. Every broken component glows red in the projection. "Your quantum drive sustained catastrophic damage from the magnetic storm," Nalavex observes, manipulating the hologram with six-fingered hands. "The navigational array is beyond repair with your current technology." She turns to face him fully. "But I can fix it all." "Why would you help me?" Marco asks, years of frontier exploration having taught him that nothing comes without cost. Nalavex's skin darkens momentarily before she extends her arms, revealing intricate scarring that pulses with dark energy. "Because I am exiled, Captain. Cut off from my people, the Luminary, for crimes of intellectual heresy." She traces a pattern in the air, causing a new hologram to appear, a map of sorts, written in living ink that crawls across a membrane-like material. "The Whispering Plains," she explains, indicating a region of shifting topography. "At its center lies an abandoned research outpost of my people. Inside is a device, a chronosphere, capable of manipulating localized time. My life's work before my exile." "And you want me to retrieve it," Marco concludes, studying the bizarre landscape on the holographic map. "Why not go yourself?" "These marks," she says, indicating the scars on her arms, "are not mere punishment. They're genetic markers that activate defense systems throughout Luminary territory. I would be detected and eliminated before reaching the outpost perimeter." She manipulates the model again, zooming in on sections of the plains where reality itself seems to warp and shift. The plains are guarded by adaptive defense drones that target specific genetic signatures, programmed to hunt luminary biology. But humans, her galaxy-filled eyes assessed him with scientific curiosity. "Your species possesses unique neurological patterns. The defense systems won't recognize you as a threat." Marco frowns. "So I just walk in and take this chronosphere? Somehow, I doubt it's that simple." Indeed not, Nalavex concedes. The planes themselves present considerable dangers, reality distortions that can trap the unwary in temporal loops or spatial paradoxes. Most sentient beings lose their minds to the cognitive dissonance. But humans won't. Marco asks skeptically, "Your species evolved on a planet with constantly changing conditions, developing a remarkable adaptability to cognitive dissonance. Your brains naturally reconcile contradictory information in ways my people cannot." She gestures to the map, where pathways illuminate. "I believe you can navigate the distortions where others would be driven mad." Marco studies the alien landscape on the projection, weighing his options. 12 hours of life support versus a dangerous journey for an alien he just met. "And if I succeed," he asks, "you'll fix my ship, no other conditions." "You have my word," Nalavex responds, her skin pulsing with patterns that somehow convey sincerity despite their alienness. What she doesn't tell him, what she can't tell him yet, is that the chromosphere contains more than just time-altering technology. It holds the key to rewriting the rigid social structure that has kept her people from evolving for millennia. And that human neurological patterns are the missing catalyst her research had always lacked. Marco takes a deep breath. When do we start? The edge of the whispering plains announces itself with subtle wrongness. Gravity that pulls sideways rather than down, colors that shift depending on the angle of observation, and a persistent sound just below the threshold of conscious hearing. Marco adjusts the settings on his exosuit, grateful that Nalavex had enhanced its protective capabilities before they departed. "Stay on the path I've marked." Her voice instructs through the communication device she'd implanted behind his ear. The topology appears stable now, but it can change without warning. Marco steps carefully across terrain that resembles polished obsidian, watching as his footprints momentarily fill with what looks like liquid starlight before fading. "Define change for me," he requests, scanning the horizon where massive shapes hover in the distance, defying perspective. The planes exist in a state of quantum uncertainty. Nalavex explains, her voice a steady presence despite the static interference that occasionally distorts her words. Reality here hasn't fully decided what it wants to be. As if triggered by her explanation, the ground ahead of Marco suddenly transforms into a pool of quicksilver that reaches out with tentacle-like appendages. He leaps backward, nearly losing his balance as the surface beneath him undulates. "Left," Nalavex commands sharply. "Follow the blue lines in the rock formation." Marco spots the faint luminescent trails she's referring to and changes course, the quicksilver pool seemingly pursuing him before losing interest and collapsing back into itself. He navigates around fields of crystal flowers that emit sonic frequencies his suit identifies as potentially debilitating, their petals tracking his movement like predatory eyes. "The outpost appears as a fixed point on my maps," Nalavex continues, "but the paths leading to it are in constant flux. Your neural patterns are allowing you to perceive the consistent elements. Remarkable." 3 hours into the journey, Marco encounters his first gravity pocket, a spherical distortion that compresses space around it. He watches as a fluttering creature similar to a butterfly flies too close and instantly shrinks to microscopic size, trapped in what must be immense gravitational pressure. "Don't approach closer than 5 meters to any visual distortion," Nalavex warns. Little late for that advice, Marco mutters, carefully backing away from the nearly invisible anomaly. The communication device suddenly emits a high-pitched alert. "Multiple signatures approaching from northeast," Nalavex reports, her tone sharpening. "Defense drones." Marco spots them immediately. A swarm of metallic particles no larger than dust motes, glittering as they move with collective intelligence through the air. The swarm coalesces into a roughly humanoid shape, its surface constantly shifting and reforming. They've detected movement, but not identified your species yet. Nalavex explains rapidly. Hold position and... Not an option. Marco interrupts as the construct surges forward, its form elongating into something with too many limbs. Making a split-second assessment, he sprints directly toward one of the gravity anomalies he'd been avoiding, timing his approach carefully. The drone construct follows, accelerating as it identifies him as an intruder. Marco waits until the last possible moment before diving aside, rolling across the unstable terrain as the pursuing entity hits the gravity pocket. The effect is immediate and catastrophic. The swarm compresses violently, its components crushed together before the entire structure implodes with a sound like shattering glass. Silence follows, broken only by Marco's heavy breathing. How did you know that would work? Nalavex asks, genuine curiosity evident in her voice. Marco pulls himself to his feet, checking his equipment for damage. I didn't, he admits. But standing still meant certain death. The communication device remains quiet for several moments. When Nalavex speaks again, something has changed in her tone. That approach, using environmental hazards against a technologically superior opponent, it wouldn't occur to my people. We rely on established protocols, predictable outcomes. In my experience, Marco responds, continuing along the path as the landscape around him ripples like fabric in a breeze. Exploration means improvisation. The universe rarely follows our plans. As they make camp beneath the shelter of giant floating stones that evening, Marco shares stories of human exploration history, tales of individuals who ventured into the unknown with limited information and returned with discoveries that changed everything. For the first time, Nalavex begins to understand that what her people dismissed as primitive intuition might actually be an evolutionary advantage. After 3 days traversing the shifting reality of the Whispering Plains, Marco crests a ridge of crystalline formations to find the mists finally parting before him. The research outpost emerges from the haze like a massive geometric puzzle, a structure that defies conventional architecture, with sections constantly rotating and reconfiguring themselves around a central core that pulses with energy. We've arrived, he says, voice hoarse from the thin air of this elevation. The facility should be dormant. Nalavex responds through the comm device, her voice tight with what Marco has learned to recognize as anxiety despite her alien vocal patterns. Approach the north entrance, the section that resembles an inverted pyramid. Marco navigates down the slope, his suit sensors recording everything. Up close, the outpost's surface appears to be made of a material similar to liquid metal, but solid, with occasional ripples passing across it like stones dropped in still water. The entrance scanners will activate automatically, Nalavex warns. They'll analyze your biological composition. They're programmed to respond with lethal force to unauthorized luminary. And to humans? Marco asks, pausing at the threshold of what appears to be an entrance. Unknown. Your species wasn't catalogued when this facility was operational. Comforting, Marco mutters, stepping forward. Immediately, beams of coherent light project from recessed panels, scanning his body from multiple angles. Marco remains perfectly still as the light changes color, shifting from blue to violet to a shade his eyes can barely perceive. After what feels like an eternity, the scanning beams converge on his face, focusing on his eyes. A series of musical tones emanates from the facility, rising and falling in complex patterns. The massive doors, which Marco hadn't even recognized as doors until this moment, slide open with a sound like sighing. Impossible, Nelavex whispers through the comm. The facility is coded to recognize only authorized luminary researchers. Marco steps cautiously into a vast chamber where holographic data streams flow along the walls, swirling and reconfiguring as they sense his presence. The streams begin displaying information in rapidly shifting symbols, none of which he recognizes. The system is responding to you, Nelavex says, her scientific curiosity overcoming her surprise. Can you proceed to the central chamber? It should be. She falls silent as a ghostly projection materializes before Marco. A tall, slender figure with features similar to Nelavex, but with subtle differences. The hologram regards Marco with evident curiosity, its head tilting at an inhuman angle. Subject: unidentified species. The projection announces in a language Marco somehow understands despite never having heard it before. Neural pattern analysis indicates harmonics consistent with architect sequence Alpha 7. Probability calculation: 89.7% correlation with baseline precursor era templates. What is it saying? Marco asks, the translation somehow bypassing his ears and appearing directly in his mind. Nalavex's voice falters. It's recognizing something in your neural patterns that resembles those of the architects. The Who. Beings we believe to be mythological, said to have seeded the galaxy with life billions of years ago. Her voice drops to a whisper, the foundation of all luminary religious texts. The hologram continues its analysis, circling Marco. Access granted, primary archive, genetic repository, accessible. Chronosphere chamber, accessible. It pauses, seeming to look through Marco. Query: why has an architect template returned in this primitive vessel? Before Marco can respond, the facility's internal walls reconfigure, opening a pathway deeper into the structure. The hologram gestures toward the newly formed corridor. The chronosphere chamber awaits your inspection, architect descendant. Marco glances at the waiting corridor, then back to the projection. What did it mean by primitive vessel? Nelavex is silent for so long that Marco wonders if the communication has failed. When she finally speaks, her voice is changed, humbled in a way he hasn't heard before. The AA believes you are carrying architect genetic code in a human body, she explains. It's impossible, and yet, the facility's security systems are infallible. A pause. Marco, my people have always believed we were the pinnacle of evolution, genetically engineered by the architects themselves. But if the facility is correct, humans may carry more original architect code than the luminary ever did. The holographic guardian gestures again, more insistently. The chronosphere chamber, it repeats. Please proceed, architect descendant. Marco takes a deep breath and steps forward into the heart of the ancient facility, wondering what other revelations await. The chronosphere chamber unfolds before Marco like a mechanical flower, walls sliding apart to reveal a circular room dominated by a device that defies his understanding of physics. Suspended in the center, a sphere approximately 1 meter in diameter pulses with energy that bends light around it in impossible ways. Its surface shifts between solid and transparent, occasionally revealing intricate mechanisms within that move in patterns suggesting higher dimensions. Is that it? Marco asks, approaching cautiously. Yes, Nelavex confirms, her voice tight with emotion. My life's work. The chronosphere. Marco circles the device, noting how it's connected to the facility via threads of energy that resemble fiber optics, but behave like living tissue. How do I disconnect it without triggering security protocols? The holographic guardian materializes beside him. Chronosphere extraction sequence initiated at architect descendant request. Please stand clear. The energy filaments retract from the sphere, which descends slowly onto a pedestal that rises from the floor. The sphere's pulsing stabilizes into a steady glow as it settles into a portable configuration. That was convenient, Marco observes. The facility believes you have authority to remove it, Nalavex explains, sounding as surprised as he feels. Marco, what's happening here goes beyond anything in Luminary historical records. As Marco reaches for the chronosphere, the hologram speaks again. Advisory. Chronosphere temporal manipulation functions may cause significant physiological stress to non-optimized biological systems. Recommend immediate genetic optimization for carrier. Marco hesitates. What does that mean, exactly? The hologram begins displaying technical specifications too complex for Marco to follow, but Nelevex's sharp intake of breath through the comm tells him she understands. What is it? He asks. Nothing of concern, she responds too quickly. The chronosphere is designed to interface with luminary biology. We'll make adjustments once you return. Something in her tone raises Marco's suspicions. Show me the complete project file, he commands the hologram. Before Nelevex can object, the chamber fills with three-dimensional diagrams, schematics showing a luminary body connected to the chronosphere within a temporal bubble. Text scrolls rapidly alongside the images. Translate, Marco orders. Chrono-acceleration research protocol, the Guardian announces. Subject maintained in stasis, while genetic material harvested for sequential experimental generations. Estimated research advancement, 200 standard years within 3 days of external time. Marco's blood runs cold as he understands. You plan to use me as a permanent biological reference, he says to Nalevex, anger building. Keep me in stasis while you extracted my DNA to develop your research. The silence from the comm is damning. Marco, Nalevex finally says, her voice faltering. You must understand, my people are dying. Our perfect genetic engineering led to evolutionary stagnation. We cannot adapt to new pathogens, cannot evolve with changing conditions. Your DNA, especially now that we know it contains architect patterns, could save an entire civilization. By keeping me prisoner, using me like a lab specimen. Marco steps away from the chronosphere, betrayal burning in his chest. I was wrong, she admits, surprising him. I began with that intent, yes. But these past days, watching you navigate problems with solutions no luminary would conceive, I realize there's more to humans than genetic material. There's a way of thinking, of adapting that we've lost. Their argument is interrupted by a piercing alarm that reverberates through the facility. The holographic guardian flickers, its expression shifting to something Marco reads as concern. Multiple luminary signatures detected approaching facility perimeter, it announces. Security protocols classify as Enforcement Division, authorized for lethal intervention. They found us, Nelevex says, fear evident in her voice. An enforcement squad, they must have detected the chronosphere's activation. Marco glances between the sphere and the doorway, weighing his options. Despite her deception, something in Nelevex's explanation resonates with him. The desperation of trying to save a dying people. How many in an enforcement squad? He asks, decision forming. 5, typically, equipped with gravitational weapons and phase shift armor. Marco secures the chronosphere in his pack. Then we better move quickly. As they exit the chamber, facility alarms blaring around them, Marco realizes the fundamental difference between their species. Where the luminary saw only a biological resource to be harvested, he saw a problem to be solved, even if that meant helping someone who had planned to betray him. Marco presses himself against a wall as energy blasts impact the corridor behind them. The facility's architecture continues to shift and reconfigure around them, sometimes helping to create barriers between them and their pursuers, other times forming dead ends that force them to backtrack. The security system is confused. Nalavex explains through the comm as they navigate through a section where gravity pulls sideways. It recognizes you as an authorized user, but also detects the enforcement squad's override protocols. Marco peers around a corner, catching a glimpse of their pursuers, tall figures in armor that seems to absorb light, moving with mechanical precision. Any chance we can talk our way out of this? They're not programmed for negotiation. Nalavex responds grimly. Enforcement squads are given singular objectives with predetermined execution parameters. The chronosphere pulses in Marco's pack, its energy signature growing stronger. He can feel it resonating with something in his neural implant, creating a strange harmonic effect that makes his vision occasionally blur with temporal echoes, seeing moments before they happen. The eastern exit leads to a section of the plains with dense reality distortions, Nalavex says. If we can reach it, we might lose them in the fluctuations. A gravitational weapon fires behind them, the projectile warping space as it passes overhead and impacts the wall ahead, creating a vortex that begins pulling everything toward its center. Marco grabs a structural support, holding on as debris flies past. New plan, he grunts, reaching for the chronosphere. You said this thing manipulates localized time, right? Yes, but without proper calibration to your biology, using it could cause severe neural damage, Nalavex warns. The risk is better than certain death. Marco finishes, activating his neural implant's emergency protocols. The implant interface connects with the chronosphere, creating a feedback loop that sends shocks of pain through his skull. Gritting his teeth, he focuses on the conceptual framework Nalavex had explained earlier. Temporal manipulation requires mental visualization of the desired outcome. The chronosphere responds, its pulsing synchronizing with his heartbeat. Time around them slows, the approaching luminary enforcers moving as if through thick liquid. The vortex's pull weakens enough for Marco to move against it, making his way to a side passage. This won't last long, he manages, blood trickling from his nose as the neural strain increases. Which way? Left at the junction, then down 2 levels, Nalavex directs, her voice filled with something that might be awe. You shouldn't be able to control it like this, not without years of training. Marco follows her directions, the chronosphere's effect creating a bubble of altered time around them. They reach a maintenance shaft where the facility's systems connect to external sensors. Through the viewport, Marco can see the chaotic landscape of the Whispering Plains. We can escape through the utility conduits, Nalavex says, but we need to override the... She stops as Marco places his hand on the security panel. The system immediately recognizes him, security protocols disengaging as panels slide open to reveal an exit path. Your connection to the architect sequence is stronger than I realized, Nalavex observes as they make their escape onto the surface, leaving the enforcement squad trapped in the temporally distorted sections behind them. Once clear of the facility, Marco releases his mental hold on the chronosphere, collapsing to his knees as time rushes back to its normal flow. The pain is excruciating, is implant warning of potential neural damage. Nalavex kneels beside him, genuine concern evident as she administers a stabilizing agent from her equipment. Why did you bring the chronosphere? Why help me at all after learning what I had planned? Marco looks up at her, vision still swimming with temporal artifacts. Because your people need help, even if your methods were wrong. He takes a shuddering breath as the stabilizer begins to work. And because humans don't abandon others to die, even those who've betrayed them. The chronosphere pulses between them, its energy now permanently linked to Marco's neural patterns. Nalavex studies him with new understanding. The Luminary Council claimed that emotional decision-making was evolutionary weakness, she says quietly. But what you just demonstrated suggests otherwise. In the distance, alarms continue to sound from the facility. Their momentary safety won't last long. We have 3 choices now, Marco says, struggling to his feet. Run and keep running, try to fight an entire civilization, or find another way entirely. For the first time since their meeting, Nalavex looks to him for direction. What would a human do? The journey back across the whispering plains becomes a desperate game of hide and seek. The enforcement squad has called for reinforcements, and Nalavex's monitoring device shows a full tactical division converging on their position, a fleet of ships that seem to bend reality around them as they search the plains methodically. We won't reach my workshop before they intercept us, Nalavex says, her skin pulsing with dark patterns that Marco has learned indicate distress. The tactical division carries equipment designed specifically to track chronosphere energy signatures. Marco studies the chronosphere, which now responds to his thoughts almost instinctively. The neural connection has grown stronger, temporal echoes allowing him glimpses of probability paths, ghostly images of potential futures branching out before them. What if we don't hide? He suggests, a plan forming. What if we use your workshop as a fortress instead? Nalavex tilts her head, considering. The structure has some defensive capabilities, but nothing that could withstand a tactical division. Then we upgrade it, Marco says, focused on one particular probability branch that keeps reappearing. My ship. You said you could fix it. Can you do more than that? Enhance it. Theoretically, yes. Luminary biotechnology could interface with your vessel's systems, but... Then that's our play, Marco interrupts, already adjusting their course through a section of the plains where reality seems more stable. We get back, you fix and enhance my ship, and we use it as our primary defense system. The journey takes 17 hours of continuous movement, using the chronosphere in measured bursts to accelerate through particularly dangerous sections. When they finally reach the edge of the plains, Marco's neural implant is overheating from the strain of interfacing with the alien technology, but his mind is clear. Nalavex's workshop comes into view, its breathing walls pulsing with increased activity as it senses the chronosphere's approach. Inside, she immediately connects to her systems, initiating the repair sequence for Marco's ship, which has been moved into a central chamber. The tactical division will arrive in approximately 3 hours, she reports, multiple appendages working simultaneously across different control surfaces. I've begun integrating luminary biotechnology with your vessel's systems, but complete implementation will require at least 5 hours. Marco connects the chronosphere to a receptor node Nalavex creates. Then we'll have to buy time, he says. Can you create a localized time dilation field? Accelerate your work while slowing the approach of the tactical division. Nalavex's eyes widen. That application never occurred to me, she admits. The chronosphere was designed for research acceleration, not tactical temporality manipulation. Different perspectives, different solutions, Marco says with a tight smile. That's the human advantage. Working together, they create a temporal bubble around the workshop, giving Nalavex nearly 12 subjective hours to complete work that would have taken 4. Marco's ship transforms before his eyes, its hull integrating with living tissue that strengthens its structure, weapon systems augmented with gravitational manipulation technology, sensors enhanced to detect quantum-level fluctuations. When the tactical division arrives, a fleet of 5 ships that materialize above the iridescent beach, they expect to find 2 desperate fugitives. Instead, they encounter something their predictive algorithms cannot process: human adaptability merged with luminary precision. Marco takes the pilot's seat in his transformed vessel, neural implant interfacing directly with the ship's enhanced systems. The chronosphere, now integrated into the ship's core, pulses in synchronization with his heartbeat. They're deploying ground forces. Nalavex reports from the co-pilot position, monitoring sensor data. Standard containment protocol. They'll surround the workshop and deploy sequential compression fields to force surrender. Marco initiates launch sequence, feeling the ship respond to his thoughts more than his physical inputs. They're expecting luminary tactics, he says, hands moving across controls that are now half mechanical, half biological. Let's show them something new. The workshop's ceiling rises open, and the enhanced ship rises on gravitational repulsors. The tactical division, detecting the unexpected movement, redirects their focus upward, exactly as Marco planned. The battle above the iridescent beaches of XR-27 becomes a display of impossible maneuvers. Marco's enhanced ship darts between the larger luminary vessels, its hybrid systems adapting to each countermeasure almost instantaneously. Where the luminary rely on predetermined tactical patterns, Marco operates on instinct and creativity, using the planet's strange gravitational anomalies to his advantage. They're attempting to establish a containment field, Nalavex warns, her hands dancing across the biological interface. If they succeed, we'll be trapped within a temporal stasis bubble. Marco doesn't respond verbally, instead channeling his intention through the neural link. The chronosphere at the ship's core pulses brightly, creating a counter-resonance that disrupts the forming containment field. He pushes the ship into a maneuver that no luminary pilot would attempt, diving directly toward the surface before pulling up at the last moment, causing 2 pursuing vessels to collide as they try to adjust. Their commander is hailing us, Nalavex reports with surprise. Marco nods, allowing the communication through while maintaining evasive patterns. A holographic projection appears on the bridge, a luminary with elaborate markings denoting high rank, its expression unreadable to human eyes, but conveying something Nalavex clearly recognizes. Researcher Nalavex, the commander addresses her formally. The council has authorized me to offer terms. Marco exchanges a glance with Nalavex, who appears as surprised as he is. He brings the ship to a holding pattern, ready to resume evasive action at any sign of betrayal. What terms could the council possibly offer an exile? Nalavex responds, her voice carefully controlled. The commander's skin patterns shift subtly. The truth, which you deserved long ago. A pause, weighted with significance. Your research was correct. The luminary are dying as a species. The admission hangs in the air between them. Nalavex's hands freeze above the controls. Our perfect genetic engineering led to a catastrophic lack of adaptability, the commander continues. New pathogens have emerged on our homeworld against which we have no defense. The Council of Elders has known this for centuries, but chosen a path of managed extinction rather than risk the unpredictability of change. Marco watches Nalavex carefully, seeing the complex emotions play across her alien features, vindication mixed with horror at the confirmation of her people's fate. "Why tell us this now?" she asks. "Because our sensors detect something unprecedented in your vessel, the successful integration of luminary technology with a ship piloted by a non-luminary consciousness. Something our best scientists declared impossible." The commander's gaze shifts to Marco. "And because our analysis of the battle indicates we cannot defeat you through conventional means." Marco's tactical readouts confirm this assessment. The ship's hybrid systems have adapted to every strategy the tactical division has deployed, learning and evolving with each exchange. "What do you want?" Marco asks directly. "A third path," the commander replies. "Neither surrender nor extinction. The Council has maintained for generations that only pure luminary evolutionary development is acceptable. But your existence," he gestures to their hybrid ship, "suggests another possibility." Nalavex leans forward. "You're proposing we share the chronosphere research." "I'm proposing more than that," the commander says. "I'm proposing we learn from humans, from their adaptability, their intuitive problem-solving, their willingness to embrace chaos rather than eliminate it." His skin patterns shift to formal declaration mode. "I offer safe passage to Earth and then to the luminary homeworld, where you would both be granted advisory status to the Council of Evolutionary Sciences." Marco glances at the chronosphere, seeing probability branches converging toward a single path, one where two vastly different species find strength in their complementary differences. "It began with a simple request to fix my ship," Marco says with a slight smile toward Nalavex. "Now we're discussing the future of an entire civilization." Nalavex's skin glows with patterns Marco has never seen before, hope perhaps. "My people always believed that perfection meant the elimination of uncertainty," she says. "We never understood that true evolution requires embracing the unknown." As they accept the commander's terms and set coordinates for Earth, the first step in a journey that will eventually take them to the luminary homeworld, Marco logs the planet officially in his captain's database, XR27, now designated Genesis Point. The name seems fitting for a world where a chance encounter has begun something unprecedented, not just first contact between species, but the first deliberate co-evolution of distinctly different intelligent beings. And it all began because an alien woman said she could fix his ship, if he fulfilled her request.